AITA for ruining my sister's wedding over a family secret? Let me start by saying that I didn't set out to ruin my sister's wedding. In fact, I was genuinely excited for her. My sister, Lily, 32F, had been planning this wedding for over a year, and she deserved her dream day. But what happened wasn't entirely my fault, and now my family is completely divided. I need Reddit to tell me if I'm the asshole or if I was justified. I, 28F, have always had a complicated relationship with Lily. She's the golden child, perfect grades, perfect career, perfect fiancé. You get the idea? Growing up, I was constantly compared to her, and no matter what I did, I was always Lily's little sister. Despite this, I've always tried to support her, even when she's been less than kind to me. Fast forward to the wedding. Lily's fiancé, Jake, 34M, is a great guy, kind, funny, and completely devoted to her. I got along with him well from the start, and honestly, I was happy she'd found someone like him. But then, 2 weeks before the wedding, everything fell apart. I was at a family dinner when my mom had a little too much wine and let something slip. She mentioned, offhandedly, that Lily always gets what she wants, even back in the day when she stole Jake from you. I froze. What do you mean she stole Jake from me? My mom's face turned pale. She tried to backtrack, saying she'd had too much to drink, but I pressed her. Eventually, she admitted that Jake and I had met first, years ago, before he and Lily got together. Apparently, Jake and I had gone on a few dates, but I didn't remember because Lily had convinced my parents not to tell me. She'd swooped in, started dating him, and manipulated the situation so I never found out. I was furious. Not because Jake ended up with Lily. Honestly, I hadn't even remembered dating him, but because my entire family had kept this from me for years. They'd all conspired to let Lily have her way, yet again, while I was left in the dark. After the dinner, I confronted my mom and dad privately. They tried to justify their actions, saying things like, "It was so long ago," and "You seemed happy enough without him." My mom even had the audacity to say, "Well, you two weren't serious and Lily was." It just made sense. I didn't know what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront Lily immediately, but I didn't want to ruin her wedding. Another part of me felt like I deserved some kind of closure, especially since everyone else in my family seemed to think I should just sweep this under the rug. I decided to sit on it and see if I could let it go. But the closer we got to the wedding, the more it ate at me. Every time I saw Lily gushing about Jake, every time I saw my parents doting on her, I felt like a second-class citizen in my own family. The final straw came at the rehearsal dinner. During Lily's speech, she started talking about how she and Jake were soulmates and how their relationship was fate. She looked right at me and said, "It's funny how life works out, isn't it? Sometimes, you just know when someone's meant to be yours." I swear she smirked. That's when I snapped. I stood up, raised my glass, and said, "To fate, and to sisters who lie and steal your boyfriends." The room went dead silent. The silence after my toast was deafening. For a moment, everyone just stared at me, mouths hanging open like I'd slapped them all across the face. Lily, in particular, looked like she couldn't decide whether to cry, scream, or faint. Jake looked utterly confused, his eyes darting between me and Lily like he was trying to piece together a puzzle he hadn't realized existed. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Lily finally hissed, her voice low but dripping with venom. "Oh, don't play dumb," I said, my heart pounding. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Or should I spell it out for everyone here?" "Alex," my mom snapped, her face red with a mix of anger and embarrassment. "This isn't the time or place." "Really, Mom?" I shot back. "Because it seems like the perfect time to bring up how Lily stole Jake from me, and you all covered it up like it was no big deal." The room collectively gasped, and Jake's face went pale. "Wait," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What is she talking about?" Before Lily could say anything, my mom stood up and tried to defuse the situation. "It's not what it sounds like," she stammered. "It was years ago. Alex barely knew Jake. I didn't know him because you and Lily made sure I didn't." I shouted, cutting her off. "You all decided that Lily deserved him more, so you kept it a secret from me." How's that for family loyalty? Lily finally found her voice. Oh, my God, Alex. Are you seriously bringing this up now? I thought we were past this. Past this? I repeated, incredulous. How can I be past something I didn't even know about until 2 weeks ago? Jake looked at Lily, his eyes wide with shock. Is this true? Did you and your family keep this from her? Lily opened and closed her mouth a few times, clearly struggling to come up with an answer. Finally, she said, It wasn't like that. We didn't steal you, Jake. You and Alex went on, like, 2 dates. It wasn't serious. That wasn't your call to make. I snapped. You lied to me, Lily. And you dragged Mom and Dad into it, too. You all decided I didn't matter. Jake stood up, running a hand through his hair. I can't believe this, he muttered. Why didn't you ever tell me? Why wouldn't you let Alex and me figure this out for ourselves? Because it wouldn't have worked out. Lily cried, tears streaming down her face now. You two barely had any chemistry. We were meant to be together. And I couldn't let something that wasn't real get in the way of what we have. Jake shook his head, looking completely shell-shocked. I need some air, he said, before walking out of the room. Lily turned on me, her face contorted with rage. You're such a selfish bitch, she spat. You couldn't just let me have this one thing, could you? You had to make it all about you. Make it about me? I said, laughing bitterly. You've had everything, Lily. Every single thing. And when you decided you wanted Jake, you made sure to take him, too. You never cared about me. You just cared about winning. Lily screamed something incoherent and stormed out after Jake, leaving the rest of the room in stunned silence. After Lily and Jake left, my mom wasted no time laying into me. I cannot believe you, she said, her voice shaking with anger. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've embarrassed this entire family. On the eve of Lily's wedding, no less. I embarrassed the family? I shot back. How about the fact that you all lied to me for years? How about the fact that you let Lily walk all over me, time and time again? If anyone's embarrassed this family, it's her. Alex, you're overreacting, my dad said, though he looked less angry and more exhausted. It's ancient history. Lily and Jake are happy now. Isn't that what matters? No, I said firmly. What matters is that you all treated me like I didn't matter. And now you're mad because I finally stood up for myself? I grabbed my purse and left before they could say anything else. I couldn't stand to be in that room for another second. The wedding still happened, but it was a disaster. Jake showed up, but he looked distant and distracted the entire time. Lily spent most of the reception glued to his side, probably trying to convince him that I was the villain in all of this. The vibe was tense, and several guests whispered about the drama they'd overheard from the rehearsal dinner. As for me, I didn't go. I couldn't. Not after everything that had happened. My mom called me the day after to berate me for ruining Lily's big day, saying I owed her an apology. I told her I wouldn't apologize for telling the truth and that if Lily wanted to talk, she could reach out herself. She hasn't. Neither has Jake. It's been 2 weeks since the wedding, and I'm still processing everything. Part of me feels guilty for airing the family's dirty laundry so publicly, but another part of me feels vindicated. For years, I let Lily take what she wanted without a fight. I let my parents enable her, and I told myself it didn't matter because I didn't want to rock the boat. But it did matter, and I'm tired of pretending it didn't. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for ruining my sister's wedding by revealing the truth? Or was it time for someone to finally hold her accountable? AITA for telling my best friend she needs to stop bringing her boyfriend everywhere? I, 28F, have been best friends with Sarah, 28F, since we were in middle school. We've been through everything together. Awkward teenage phases, heartbreaks, college struggles, you name it. We've always been like sisters, and I honestly thought nothing could ever come between us. Then, she met Jason, 30M. At first, I was thrilled for her. Sarah had been single for a while and had been really down about it. So when she met Jason on a dating app last year, it felt like a win for her. And honestly, he seemed great in the beginning. He's funny, charming, and clearly crazy about her. They got serious quickly, but I figured that was just how some relationships worked. I was happy for her, at first. The problem started a few months ago. Sarah began bringing Jason everywhere. It didn't matter what the occasion was, girls' night, brunch, even just casual coffee hangouts. If Sarah was invited, Jason came along. At first, I didn't say anything because I figured it was a honeymoon phase thing. Plus, I wanted to be supportive. But as time went on, it started to bother me more and more. Don't get me wrong, Jason isn't a bad guy. He's nice enough, and I don't have any personal issues with him. But every single outing started to feel like a third-wheel situation. The dynamic between Sarah and me completely changed. We couldn't have private conversations, and even when we were in a group setting, Jason dominated the conversation. He's one of those people who always has a story, and somehow it's always about him. It was exhausting. A couple of weeks ago, I planned a small dinner with some mutual friends. The whole idea was to catch up with the group, just the girls, and relax. I made it very clear in the group chat that this was a no-partners dinner. Everyone agreed, or so I thought. The night of the dinner, Sarah showed up with Jason. When I saw them walking together, I honestly thought I was hallucinating. I even double-checked the group chat to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. Nope. It clearly said, no partners, just the girls this time. But there he was, laughing and acting like it was no big deal. The entire dinner felt awkward. The other girls clearly noticed, but no one said anything outright. Jason spent most of the evening talking about himself, again, and Sarah just beamed at him like he was the most fascinating person in the world. Meanwhile, I sat there, quietly fuming. After dinner, I pulled Sarah aside and asked her why she brought Jason when I'd specifically said no partners. She looked genuinely confused and said, "Oh, I thought that didn't apply to Jason. You guys love him, right?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sarah, it applies to everyone. It wasn't about Jason specifically. It was about having a girls' night. Just us. She shrugged and said, "Well, he's basically one of us now. I don't see why it's a big deal." At that point, I didn't even know how to respond. I just told her I needed some air and left. The night was ruined, and I couldn't shake the feeling that things between us were fundamentally changing. The next day, Sarah texted me like nothing had happened. She asked if I wanted to grab coffee, and I decided it was time to address the issue head-on. I didn't want to let this fester and damage our friendship any further. When we met up, I told her how I was feeling. I said that I missed hanging out with her one-on-one, that it felt like Jason was taking over all of our time together, and that I wished she'd respect boundaries when it came to group plans. Her reaction floored me. "Are you serious right now?" she said, looking genuinely offended. "You don't like Jason, do you? You've been weird around him for months." "It's not that I don't like him," I said. "He's fine, Sarah, but I didn't sign up for him to be part of everything. Sometimes I just want to spend time with my best friend without a third person there." She crossed her arms and said, "Well, Jason is part of my life now. We're a package deal. If you can't accept that, maybe we need to rethink our friendship." That hit me like a slap in the face. I told her I didn't think it was fair to make me choose between her and her boyfriend, but she doubled down, saying she wasn't asking me to choose. She was just setting expectations. We left the conversation on bad terms. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Was I really asking for too much? Or was I being a bad friend by not fully embracing Jason? After my disastrous coffee meetup with Sarah, I felt emotionally drained. It was like I'd hit a brick wall trying to explain my side. No matter how much I tried to frame it as a desire to maintain our one-on-one friendship, Sarah took it as an attack on Jason. I started replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if I'd been too harsh or if I'd phrased things wrong. But the more I thought about it, the more certain I was that I hadn't done anything unreasonable. All I wanted was to spend time with my best friend without her boyfriend tagging along every single time. Was that really such a big ask? The next few weeks were awkward, to say the least. Sarah didn't text me much, and when she did, it was short and cold. The usual warmth in our friendship had vanished. I considered reaching out to clear the air, but every time I drafted a text, I couldn't bring myself to hit send. I didn't want to be the one to apologize, not when I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. The real fallout started when the rest of our friend group got involved. A few days after the coffee meetup, one of the girls from the dinner, Emily, reached out to me. "Hey," she said over text. Is everything okay with you and Sarah? She mentioned something about you having an issue with Jason. My stomach sank. I hadn't expected Sarah to bring this up with the group. I thought it was a private matter between us. But clearly, she decided to air our dirty laundry. I explained the situation to Emily as neutrally as I could. I told her how I felt like Sarah and I never got time alone anymore, and how I just wanted one girl's night without partners. I left out the more heated parts of the conversation because I didn't want to make Sarah look bad. Emily was sympathetic, but hesitant. I get where you're coming from, she said, but Sarah seems really upset. She feels like you don't support her relationship. Support her relationship? I'd always supported her relationship. I'd been nothing but happy for her and Jason. At least until he started coming to every single event like an honorary member of the friend group. But somehow, Sarah had spun this into me being anti-Jason, and now the group was starting to see me as the bad guy. Things came to a head at Sarah's birthday party a week later. She'd invited the whole friend group, plus Jason, of course, to a casual dinner at her favorite restaurant. I wasn't sure if I should even go, but Emily convinced me that it would be better to show up and try to smooth things over. The moment I walked in, I could feel the tension. Sarah barely acknowledged me, and Jason was his usual loud, attention-grabbing self. The group tried to keep things light, but the mood was undeniably off. About halfway through dinner, Jason brought up the girls' night dinner from a few weeks ago. You know, he said, grinning, I still don't get why I wasn't allowed to come to that. Don't you guys like me? The table went quiet. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. It wasn't about you, Jason, I said carefully. It was just supposed to be a girls-only night. But you didn't make that clear to Sarah, did you? He said, his grin fading. Before I could respond, Sarah jumped in. No, she didn't. She made it sound like you were the problem. My jaw dropped. That's not true, Sarah. I never said Jason was the problem. I just said I wanted time with you, without partners. And I told you, she said, her voice rising, that Jason is part of my life now. If you can't handle that, then maybe you need to figure out what kind of friend you want to be. The table went dead silent. I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. I couldn't believe she was doing this, turning her birthday dinner into a public confrontation. I'm not the one making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be, I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could. I've supported your relationship from the beginning. All I asked for was a little balance. Sarah rolled her eyes. Balance? You mean excluding Jason every time it's inconvenient for you? At that point, I'd had enough. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and said, I think I should go. Happy birthday, Sarah. And then I left. In the days after the party, the group chat exploded. Half the girls were taking Sarah's side, saying I'd overreacted and should have just let it go. The other half were more neutral, saying they understood where I was coming from but thought I could have handled it better. Sarah didn't text me. She didn't call. She didn't even try to explain herself. It was like she'd decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore. And honestly, that hurt more than the fight itself. About 2 weeks after the birthday dinner, Emily reached out again. She told me that Sarah had been venting to her about how I don't like Jason and don't respect her choices. But Emily also admitted that she thought Sarah was being unfair. She's really wrapped up in Jason, Emily said. I think she's afraid of losing him, and she's projecting that fear onto you. It's not right, but maybe give her some time. I appreciated Emily's honesty, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to give Sarah time. The whole situation had left such a bad taste in my mouth. I felt like I'd been fighting for a friendship that Sarah didn't value as much as I did. Still, after some soul-searching, I decided to reach out one last time. I texted Sarah and asked if we could meet up to talk. To my surprise, she agreed. When we met, it was clear that things were still tense. Sarah didn't look at me right away, and I could tell she was bracing for another fight. But I didn't want to fight. I just wanted closure, one way or another. I'm sorry if I hurt you, I said. That was never my intention. I care about you, and I want us to stay friends. But I need you to understand where I'm coming from. I miss the friendship we had before Jason. I'm happy for you, but I also need some space where it's just us. Is that too much to ask? She sighed, finally meeting my eyes. I don't know. Jason is such a big part of my life now. It's hard to separate the two. I'm not asking you to separate them, I said. I'm just asking for balance. There was a long pause. Then she nodded. Okay, I'll try. It wasn't the most heartfelt apology, but it was something. And for now, that's enough. AITA for refusing to let my sister move in after she lost her job? Let me start by saying that I love my sister, Megan, 29F. We've always had a complicated relationship, but at the end of the day, she's my little sister, and I want the best for her. That said, she has a habit of making impulsive decisions and expecting everyone else to clean up the mess afterward. I, 33F, have always been the responsible one in the family. Growing up, our parents relied on me to help take care of Megan. I was the one who tutored her when she fell behind in school, the one who covered for her when she got into trouble, and the one who bailed her out when she went through a string of bad decisions in her early 20s. Megan, on the other hand, has always been carefree to a fault. She's fun and charismatic, but she's never been able to stick to anything: jobs, relationships, or even apartments. I've spent most of my adult life setting boundaries with Megan because, if I didn't, she'd bleed me dry, emotionally and financially. But a few weeks ago, she called me in tears, and those boundaries started to crumble. Megan had just lost her job. She'd been working as a server at a high-end restaurant in the city, but apparently, there'd been some kind of dispute with her manager, and she'd been let go. To make matters worse, she'd been living paycheck to paycheck and hadn't saved anything. She couldn't afford her rent, and her landlord had given her an ultimatum: pay up or move out. I felt terrible for her, but I also wasn't surprised. This wasn't the first time Megan had found herself in this kind of situation. Over the years, she'd borrowed money from me more times than I could count, sometimes to cover bills, sometimes for emergencies that turned out to be things like concert tickets or shopping sprees. I'd stopped lending her money a few years ago after she forgot to pay me back for the fourth time in a row. This time, though, Megan wasn't asking for money. She was asking for something bigger. "Can I move in with you?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Just for a little while. I need to get back on my feet. Here's the thing. My life is stable, but it's also full. I live in a small 2-bedroom house with my fiancé, Ryan, 35M, and our dog. We're both working full-time jobs and planning our wedding for later this year. The spare bedroom is Ryan's home office, which he uses every day because he works remotely. There isn't a lot of space to spare, and the idea of appending our lives to accommodate Megan made my stomach churn. But Megan was desperate, and I didn't know how to say no outright. So I told her I needed to talk to Ryan first. Ryan, bless him, is one of the most patient and understanding people I know, but even he looked concerned when I told him about Megan's request. "Babe," he said gently, "I get that you want to help her, but you know how this goes. She's not going to stay for a little while. She's going to move in, take over, and make it impossible for us to live our lives." "I know," I admitted, "but what am I supposed to do? She's my sister." "You can say no," he said simply. "You've bailed her out so many times. At some point, she has to figure things out for herself." The next day, I called Megan back. I tried to be as gentle as I could, but there's no easy way to tell someone you won't help them when they're in crisis. "Megan," I said, "I've thought about it, and I just don't think it's going to work for you to move in here. Ryan and I don't have the space, and with everything going on right now, it would be too much." Her reaction was immediate. "Are you kidding me?" she snapped. "You have a whole house. You can't let me crash in the spare room for a couple of months?" "It's not that simple," I said. "Ryan works from home, and he needs that space for his office. And we're planning a wedding. It's just not a good time." Megan didn't want to hear it. She accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, saying that after everything she'd been through, the least I could do was help her out. She brought up all the times I'd leaned on her when we were kids, which, let's be honest, was mostly me helping her, and even threw our parents into the mix, saying they'd be ashamed of me for turning my back on family. By the time I hung up, I felt like the worst sister in the world. The next few days were rough. Megan sent me multiple texts, ranging from passive-aggressive to outright angry. One said, "I guess I know where I stand with you now," and another said, "Don't bother inviting me to the wedding, since I clearly don't matter to you." Ryan kept reminding me that I'd made the right decision, and logically, I knew he was right. But the guilt was overwhelming. What kind of sister was I if I couldn't even give her a place to stay? What if she ended up homeless because of me? To make matters worse, Megan started talking to our extended family about the situation. Soon, I was getting calls and messages from relatives I barely spoke to, all of them weighing in on what I should do. My aunt even said, family is supposed to help each other. If you can't help Megan, who will? It felt like I was being crushed under the weight of everyone's expectations. The days after I told Megan she couldn't move in were some of the most emotionally draining I've ever experienced. The guilt was unbearable, and the calls and texts from family didn't help. Everyone seemed to have an opinion, and none of them were in my favor. It didn't matter that Megan had a history of making bad decisions, or that my house wasn't set up to accommodate her. They only saw one thing. I wasn't helping my sister when she needed me. The messages ranged from subtle digs to outright attacks. My cousin texted, "I'm just surprised. You've always seemed like the generous type," while my aunt called me selfish and ungrateful for the blessings in my life. At one point, someone even suggested that Ryan must be the one keeping me from helping Megan. That comment hurt the most because Ryan had been nothing but supportive, even as he encouraged me to set boundaries. Meanwhile, Megan was still texting me daily. One moment, she'd be begging for help, swearing this time would be different, and that she'd only need a couple of weeks. The next, she'd lash out, saying things like, "I guess money changes people," or "Mom and Dad would be ashamed of you." I tried to ignore the messages, but the weight of them was crushing. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a knot form in my stomach. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't enjoy time with Ryan, couldn't even sleep properly. It felt like Megan had invaded every corner of my life without even setting foot in my house. Then, Megan escalated things. One night, Ryan and I were sitting down for dinner when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there she was, Megan, standing on the porch with 2 suitcases at her feet. Her eyes were red, and she looked exhausted, but she didn't seem the least bit apologetic. "I didn't know what else to do," she said, pushing past me and into the house. "I don't have anywhere else to go." I stood there, stunned. "Megan, you can't just show up like this. I told you." "I know what you told me," she interrupted, her voice sharp, "but I didn't have a choice. You're my sister. You're supposed to help me." Ryan walked into the room, looking as shocked as I felt. "Megan," he said gently, "this isn't fair to Alex. Or to me. You can't just move in without asking." "I did ask," she snapped. "And you said no. But clearly, I don't have any other options, so here I am." I didn't know what to do. On one hand, I felt like I couldn't just kick her out. She was my sister, and she genuinely looked like she was at the end of her rope. On the other hand, I knew that letting her stay would only enable her further. She'd already ignored my boundaries by showing up uninvited, and I had no reason to believe she'd respect them if I let her stay. Ryan pulled me aside and whispered, "You can't let her do this. If you give in now, it'll never end." He was right. I knew he was right. But standing there, looking at Megan and her suitcases, I felt like the worst person in the world. "Megan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you can't stay here. I'm sorry, but you can't." Her face crumpled. "Are you serious?" she said, her voice breaking. "You're really going to throw me out? Your own sister?" "I'm not throwing you out," I said. "You showed up here uninvited after I already told you it wasn't going to work. That's not fair to me, and it's not fair to Ryan." She stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed her suitcases and stormed out without another word. I watched her walk down the driveway and felt my heart break a little. I wanted to call her back, to tell her I'd changed my mind, but I didn't. I couldn't. The next day, the calls from family started again. Megan must have told them what happened, because now the narrative was even worse. I wasn't just refusing to help my sister. I'd thrown her out onto the street. My aunt left me a voicemail saying, "I don't know how you sleep at night," and my cousin texted, "I hope you never find yourself in a position where you need help, because karma's a bitch." It was overwhelming, but Ryan reminded me to focus on the facts. Megan wasn't homeless. She had other friends she could stay with, and she still had time to figure things out. I wasn't abandoning her. I was forcing her to take responsibility for herself. Still, the guilt lingered. A week later, Megan called me. I hesitated before answering, but something told me to pick up. I got a job, she said, her voice small. It's just retail, but it's something. That's great, Megan, I said, genuinely relieved. I'm proud of you. There was a long pause, and then she said, I'm sorry for how I acted. I shouldn't have shown up like that. I was just scared. Her apology caught me off guard. Megan wasn't the type to admit when she was wrong, so hearing her say those words felt like a step forward. It's okay, I said. I just want you to take care of yourself. You're capable of more than you think. I'm trying, she said. I really am. It's been a few weeks since that call, and Megan seems to be doing better. She's still figuring things out, but she's managing on her own, which is more than I expected. I've been cautious about reestablishing boundaries, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like we're moving in the right direction. As for my family, some of them still think I'm the villain in this story, and I've accepted that. At the end of the day, I know I made the right decision, not just for me, but for Megan too. Sometimes, the best way to help someone is to let them help themselves. So, Reddit, am I the asshole? AITA for exposing my best friend's perfect relationship at her engagement party? I, 29F, have been best friends with Rachel, 29F, since we were in high school. We've been through everything together: bad breakups, career changes, and family drama. Rachel has always been like a sister to me, so when she met Daniel, 31M, 3 years ago and fell head over heels, I was thrilled for her. Daniel seemed great at first. He was charming, attentive, and had this way of making Rachel feel like the most important person in the room. I wasn't super close to him, but he was always polite, and Rachel couldn't stop gushing about how he was the one. Things seemed perfect, too perfect, in hindsight. About 6 months ago, I started noticing little things that didn't sit right. Rachel would cancel plans last minute because Daniel needed her, or she'd show up late looking stressed and flustered. When I asked her about it, she'd brush it off, saying he was just having a rough time at work or that relationships take effort. Then, at a group dinner, I saw something that really set off alarm bells. Daniel snapped at Rachel over something minor, a joke she made about his cooking. It wasn't just a light-hearted correction. It was cold, dismissive, and left her looking visibly upset. She laughed it off, but I could tell it bothered her. I started paying closer attention after that. I noticed how often she apologized to him for things that weren't her fault, how she'd change the subject if anyone mentioned their relationship, and how she never seemed as bubbly and confident as she used to. It was subtle, but it was there. The real bombshell dropped 3 weeks ago. I was out at a bar with some coworkers when I spotted Daniel across the room. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, until I saw him with another woman. They were sitting at a corner table, leaning in close, and he had his arm around her shoulders. I froze, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to confront him right then and there, but I decided to take a photo instead. I knew Rachel would need proof if I was going to tell her about this. So, I snapped a picture of Daniel with the mystery woman and left the bar feeling sick to my stomach. The next day, I agonized over what to do. I didn't want to ruin Rachel's happiness, but I also couldn't sit back and let her marry someone who was clearly hiding something. After hours of debating, I decided to confront Daniel first. I figured if there was some kind of explanation, I'd hear him out before bringing Rachel into it. The confrontation. I texted Daniel, asking if we could meet up for coffee. He agreed, probably thinking it was about something harmless. When we sat down, I didn't waste any time. Daniel, I said, sliding my phone across the table, who is this? His face went pale. For a moment, he just stared at the photo, his jaw tightening. Then, he leaned back in his chair and said, "It's not what it looks like." "Really?" I said. "Because it looks like you're cheating on Rachel." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, things between Rachel and me have been complicated lately. It's not like I don't love her, but—" I cut him off. "I don't want to hear excuses, Daniel. You need to tell her the truth. She deserves to know." He just stared at me, his expression hardening. "You don't understand our relationship. This isn't your business." "It is my business," I shot back. "She's my best friend." Daniel stood up, threw some cash on the table for his coffee, and left without another word. Rachel's engagement party was a week later, and I hadn't decided what to do. I didn't want to ruin her big day, but I also couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I tried texting Daniel again, giving him one last chance to come clean, but he ignored me. That's when I made my decision. If he wasn't going to tell her, I would. Rachel's engagement party was held at a beautiful event space downtown, complete with fairy lights, champagne, and a live band. Everyone was there to celebrate. Family, friends, co-workers, all oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. I arrived feeling like I was walking into a battlefield. I'd spent the entire week agonizing over how to handle the situation, but the closer we got to the party, the clearer it became. If I didn't tell Rachel, no one else would. She deserved to know the truth before she married Daniel, no matter how much it hurt. I tried to play it cool at first. I mingled with some friends, sipped on champagne, and kept an eye on Rachel and Daniel. She looked radiant, smiling and laughing as she flitted from one guest to another, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Daniel, on the other hand, looked tense. His eyes flicked to me more than once, and I could tell he was nervous. About an hour into the party, Rachel pulled me aside for a private moment. She was glowing, practically bouncing with excitement. "Can you believe it?" she said, grabbing my hands. "I'm getting married." I forced a smile, my heart breaking for her. "Rachel, I need to talk to you about something," I said, my voice low. Her smile faltered. "What is it? You're not about to drop some bad news on me, are you?" I hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. "It's about Daniel." Her brow furrowed, and she pulled me further away from the crowd. "What about him?" "I didn't want to ruin your night," I began, "but I can't keep this from you anymore. I saw Daniel at a bar last week, with another woman. They were sitting close, and he had his arm around her. I confronted him about it, but he wouldn't give me a straight answer." Rachel's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo I'd taken. She stared at it, her hands trembling, her eyes darting between the screen and me. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. "Daniel would never. He wouldn't do this." "I know it's hard to believe," I said gently, "but I saw it with my own eyes. And when I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just told me I didn't understand your relationship." She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "No, this has to be a mistake." Before I could say anything else, Rachel stormed off to find Daniel. I followed her, dreading what was about to happen. She found him near the bar, chatting with a group of his friends. The second he saw her, his face fell. "Daniel," she said, her voice shaking, "can I talk to you?" "Now." His friends awkwardly dispersed, and Rachel pulled him into a corner. I kept my distance, but stayed close enough to hear. "What is this?" she demanded, shoving my phone in his face. Daniel glanced at the screen and then at me, his expression darkening. "You told her," he snapped. "Of course I told her," I shot back. "She deserves to know." Rachel's voice rose. "Daniel, what the hell is going on? Who is this woman?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Rachel, it's not what it looks like. She's just a friend." "A friend?" Rachel said, her voice cracking. "You don't sit like that with a friend. You don't act like that with a friend." He started stammering, trying to come up with an excuse, but Rachel cut him off. "I want the truth, Daniel. Right now." After a long pause, Daniel finally admitted it. The woman in the photo was someone he'd been seeing on and off during their relationship. He claimed it didn't mean anything, and that he still loved Rachel, but the damage was done. Her face crumpled, and tears streamed down her cheeks. "How could you do this to me?" she whispered. "How could you let me plan an entire future with you while you were sneaking around behind my back?" "I made a mistake," Daniel said, his tone desperate, "but it doesn't change how I feel about you. We can get past this." "No," Rachel said firmly, wiping her tears. "We can't." The rest of the party was chaos. Word spread quickly that something had happened between Rachel and Daniel, and people started whispering and speculating. Rachel left with her parents, and Daniel tried to follow her, but they wouldn't let him. I stayed behind to deal with the mess, fielding questions from concerned guests and deflecting blame from those who thought I'd overstepped. The next day, Rachel called me. She was devastated but grateful. "I can't believe you kept this from me for so long," she said, "but I'm glad you told me. I needed to know." She ended the engagement and cut all ties with Daniel. It was messy and painful, but she's been leaning on me and her family for support. Now, the dust has started to settle, but the situation has left me questioning everything. Some friends and family think I did the right thing, while others believe I ruined Rachel's engagement unnecessarily. Rachel has reassured me that she doesn't blame me, but I still can't shake the feeling that I blew up her life. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for exposing my best friend's fiancée at her engagement party? Or did I do the right thing by telling her the truth? AITA for selling my late grandma's house, even though my cousin was living there rent-free? This is a family drama that I never wanted to be a part of, but now I'm in the middle of it, and it feels like there's no way out. Here's the situation. My grandma passed away 3 years ago. She was an amazing woman who practically raised me, and her death hit me hard. But when it came to her house, things got complicated. In her will, she left the house to me, even though she had 4 children and several grandchildren. She said it was because I was the only one who consistently helped her out, whether it was mowing the lawn, driving her to appointments, or just spending time with her. I was honored but also conflicted. The house held a lot of memories, but it was old and in need of serious repairs. I didn't have the money or time to maintain it, so I decided to leave it empty for a while until I could figure out what to do with it. That's when my cousin, Eric, 30M, came into the picture. Eric is one of those people who always seems to have an excuse. He's never held a steady job, always has some grand plan that never materializes, and relies heavily on our family to bail him out of trouble. A few months after Grandma passed, Eric called me and asked if he could stay in the house temporarily while he got back on his feet. At the time, I didn't see the harm. The house was sitting empty, and Eric promised he'd take care of it while he was there. He swore it would only be for 6 months, tops. I agreed, on the condition that he'd cover utilities and keep the place in good condition. 6 months turned into a year, then 2. Over time, I started hearing from neighbors that the house was falling into disrepair. The yard was overgrown, the paint was peeling, and there was even a complaint about junk piling up in the driveway. I tried talking to Eric about it, but he always had an excuse. "Work's been crazy," he'd say, or "I'm waiting on some money to come through to fix that." I eventually went to check on the house myself, and what I saw shocked me. The place was a mess. The carpet was stained, the walls were scuffed, and there were dishes piled up in the sink. It was clear Eric wasn't taking care of it at all. When I confronted him, he got defensive. "I'm doing the best I can," he said. "It's not like you're paying me to live here." That comment floored me. I reminded him that he wasn't paying me anything either. Not for rent, not for repairs, not even for utilities half the time. He rolled his eyes and said, "Well, it's not like you're using the house. What's the big deal?" That was the moment I realized something needed to change. I couldn't keep letting Eric treat Grandma's house like a dumping ground, and I wasn't in a position to take over the repairs myself. So, after a lot of thought, I decided to sell the house. I gave Eric 2 months' notice to move out. I even offered to help him find another place to live. He didn't take it well. "You can't sell the house," he said, furious. "Grandma wouldn't want you to. She'd want it to stay in the family." "Grandma left the house to me," I reminded him, "and right now, it's being trashed. She wouldn't want that either." He accused me of being greedy, said I was putting money above family, and even tried to get other relatives on his side. Some of them agreed with him, saying I should let him stay because family comes first. Others said I was well within my rights to sell it, but advised me to tread carefully to avoid burning bridges. Eric refused to move out. When I gave him a formal eviction notice, he called me every name in the book and threatened to make me regret it. He even started posting about me on social media, saying I was kicking him out onto the street and disrespecting Grandma's memory. The rest of the family got involved, of course. Some supported me, saying Eric had overstayed his welcome and needed to grow up. Others took his side, saying I was being heartless and that Grandma would have wanted the house to stay in the family. I've never felt so torn. I know selling the house is the right thing to do, for me and for Grandma's memory, But the backlash has been overwhelming. Eric's refusal to move out was only the beginning. Once I served him the eviction notice, the situation spiraled into chaos. He started dodging my calls and ignored every attempt I made to communicate. The 2 months I'd given him to leave passed, and not only was he still in the house, but he'd stopped paying utilities altogether. The house was in even worse shape than before, and the bills started piling up in my name. Eric didn't just stop at ignoring me. He turned the family against me in the loudest way possible. His social media posts became a daily spectacle. He'd upload photos of Grandma's house, calling it the last piece of family history, and accusing me of selling it for greed. He painted me as a cold, heartless landlord who was throwing him onto the streets. The comments poured in from distant relatives and even people I didn't know. How can you do this to your own cousin? Family is more important than money. Grandma would be ashamed of you. I tried defending myself in the comments once, explaining that Eric had been living there rent-free for years and wasn't taking care of the house. It didn't matter. The narrative was already set. I was the villain. The family interventions. Then came the phone calls. Every aunt, uncle, and second cousin seemed to have an opinion, and they all felt compelled to share it with me. My Aunt Linda, who hadn't spoken to me in years, called out of the blue. "You know, Alex," she said in that condescending tone she always used, "Eric's been through a lot. He's just trying to get his life together. Don't you think you're being a bit harsh?" "Aunt Linda," I replied, "he's had 3 years to get his life together, and he's trashed the house Grandma left me. If you care so much, maybe you can take him in." She gasped, offended, and hung up. Other relatives tried to guilt-trip me, saying things like, "Grandma would have wanted you to help him," or "You don't even need the money. Why can't you just let him stay?" It didn't matter how many times I explained the condition of the house or Eric's complete lack of respect. They didn't want to hear it. Even my parents were conflicted. My mom thought I was doing the right thing, but my dad worried that selling the house would fracture the family, as if that hadn't already happened. Eventually, I realized I couldn't handle this on my own. I hired a lawyer to formally begin the eviction process. When Eric got the legal notice, he called me in a rage. "You're seriously dragging lawyers into this?" he yelled. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" "Eric, I gave you 2 months' notice," I said, trying to stay calm. "You've had plenty of time to figure things out. I didn't want it to come to this, but you left me no choice." He hung up on me, but not before saying, "You'll regret this." The eviction process dragged on for months. Eric refused to leave, forcing me to take him to court. By the time I finally won, the house was in shambles. I walked through it after he moved out, and I barely recognized the place. The carpet was ruined, the walls were covered in stains, and there was trash everywhere. It was clear he'd made no effort to clean up before leaving. I felt a mix of anger and sadness as I stood in the wreckage of what used to be Grandma's home. This wasn't just neglect, it was spite. Eric had destroyed the house out of pure malice, and now it was my responsibility to clean up the mess. I spent weeks getting the house ready to sell. I hired cleaners, contractors, and painters, sinking thousands of dollars into repairs. By the time it was done, the house looked beautiful again, but the emotional toll was enormous. Selling the house was the easy part. Dealing with the family was not. Eric continued his social media crusade, claiming I'd ruined his life by evicting him. He conveniently left out the part where he trashed the house and freeloaded for years. Some family members sided with me after seeing the condition of the house, but others stuck by Eric, saying I should have handled things differently. At family gatherings, the tension was palpable. My name was practically a curse word in some circles, and there were relatives who flat out refused to speak to me. Even now, months later, the rift hasn't fully healed. The house sold for a good price, and I used part of the money to pay off the legal and repair costs. The rest went into savings, which gave me a sense of closure, but it didn't erase the bitterness of the whole ordeal. As for Eric, he's living with a distant relative now, still bouncing from place to place and blaming everyone but himself for his problems. I've gone no contact with him and several other family members who made this experience hell for me. Looking back, I know I made the right decision. Grandma left the house to me for a reason. She trusted me to take care of it, and I did. But the fallout has been hard to navigate, and I still wonder if I could have handled things differently. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for selling my late grandma's house even though my cousin was living there rent-free? Or was I justified in standing my ground? Reddit, I never thought I'd be one of those people posting on Reddit for judgment, but here I am. I'm genuinely torn about whether I'm the asshole in this situation, and I could use an outside perspective. Here's the story. Buckle up, it's a long one. I, 31F, have an older brother, Mark, 35M. Growing up, Mark was the golden child. My parents doted on him constantly, and while I wouldn't say I was neglected, I was definitely left to fend for myself more often than not. Mark, on the other hand, got everything he wanted. He wasn't spoiled in the stereotypical way. He didn't throw tantrums or demand things. My parents just gave to him every new gadget, every extracurricular, every ounce of their attention. I was the quiet, good kid, so I guess they figured I didn't need as much. But while Mark was being celebrated for average grades and participation trophies, I was hitting straight A's and paying for my own extracurriculars with babysitting money. It wasn't resentment, exactly. More like I learned early on not to expect much. Mark, meanwhile, coasted through life. He dropped out of college after 2 years because it wasn't for him, and spent most of his 20s bouncing between low-paying jobs, living rent-free with my parents. When I graduated college and got my first real job, my parents made a huge deal about how Mark was figuring things out and that I should be proud of him for working part-time at a coffee shop. I let it slide. I figured everyone's journey is different, and I was doing fine on my own. But things started to shift 5 years ago, when my parents passed away within a year of each other. First my mom, then my dad. It was devastating, but I didn't have time to grieve properly because Mark, predictably, fell apart. He'd been living with them, so suddenly, he had no home, no savings, no plan. And guess who he turned to? At first, I didn't mind helping Mark. He was my brother, and I couldn't just let him be homeless. I paid for the funeral costs, he contributed nothing, helped him find an apartment, and even covered his first 6 months of rent so he could get back on his feet. I thought that was the end of it. I thought, okay, he's got a place, now he'll figure it out. But he didn't. He never has. For the past 5 years, I've been subsidizing Mark's life. Every time he hits a rough patch, and believe me, there are a lot of rough patches, I'm the one who gets the phone call. Hey sis, I'm a little short on rent this month. Can you spot me $500? Or, my car broke down, and I need $1,200 to fix it. You're the only one I can ask. He always swears it's the last time, that he'll pay me back, but he never does. The thing is, I make good money. I'm a software engineer, and I've been smart about saving and investing. But just because I can afford to help doesn't mean I should have to. I've told him as much, but he always comes back with some sob story about how hard things are for him, how he's trying his best, how mom and dad would have wanted me to help him. And I cave. Every single time. It all came to a head last week. Mark called me in tears, saying he'd lost his latest job, his 4th in 3 years, and couldn't pay his rent. He asked if he could move in with me, just for a little while, until he found a new job. I said no. My husband, Ryan, 33M, has been incredibly patient about the whole situation, but I knew this would be too much for him. We have a life. We're planning to start a family soon. I can't have my freeloading brother crashing on our couch indefinitely. I told Mark I'd help him with 1 more month's rent, but after that, he was on his own. He lost it. He started yelling, saying I was abandoning him, that I was selfish and greedy, that I didn't care about family. He accused me of hoarding my money while he struggled to survive. He even dragged mom and dad into it, saying they'd be ashamed of me for not stepping up. I snapped. I told him that he was 35 years old, not 15, and it was time for him to grow up. I told him he couldn't keep expecting me to fund his life, that he needed to take some responsibility for himself instead of leaning on me every time things got hard. I told him I was done being his safety net. He hung up on me. Since then, Mark has been texting and calling nonstop, alternating between begging me to reconsider and berating me for being a terrible sister. He's also recruited some of our extended family to his side, and now I'm getting guilt trips from my aunts and cousins about how family helps family, and how I'm letting him down. Ryan says I did the right thing, and a few close friends agree, but I can't shake the feeling that I've crossed a line. I know Mark has had a rougher life than I have, and part of me wonders if I've been too harsh. But another part of me is just tired. Tired of being dating this guy who ever has so many red flags from the start, but I fell in love with him and just kept forgiving him for telling my brother he needs to grow up and stop expecting him to fund his life. When Mark hung up my friend/coworker, I'll refer to her as Naya. I thought maybe he'd take some time to cool off, posted a photo of us on her Snapchat, and figure out his next Dallas. Dallas even felt a twinge of guilt asking her what my name was, wondering if I had a boyfriend. Now I've only been with one partner my whole life. He went on the offensive, and we had just broken up. And calls started immediately. Naya told me give Dallas a chance, at first, and I thought more of the same. So I did. Mark begging me to help Naya how she knew Dallas once, and if he lived close to us. Yet again, she said that it would be the last time, and that they were strictly friends. When I didn't respond, and would smoke together on occasion. Shifted. I believed he started accusing me of being a terrible sister, and I asked him about his friendship with Naya. Ungrateful. He explained it was strictly platonic, who lets family she wasn't sitting on a pile of money. So I believed them both. Because that wasn't enough. Spoiler alert. He brought the rest of the family into it. I was with my ex-boyfriend. My phone started blowing up with messages from our for 5 years. Cousins. We even lived together at some distant relatives. But I left him thinking the grass was greener on the other side. Mark had called them. I was single and celibate for about 4 months. About how I was letting him Dallas came into the picture. Even though I had more money than I knew what to do with. Dallas, your brother immediately hit it on. Aunt wrote, "I love talking to him. How can you just turn your back on him? I felt such a connection. Don't you remember what your parents taught you about taking care of family?" We started talking. Another message from a cousin started dating soon after. If you don't help Mark, everything you're going to regret it when it's too late. Where he got me was he asked me why I broke up with my ex-boyfriend. The worst one came from my mom's sister. He was playing a strategic game here. She called me directly. He wanted to know what my ex did wrong, so he haven't been able to listen to all the way through. I told Dallas how Jalen wouldn't open the door for me. So disappointed in you, Alex. Every door for me. They'd be heartbroken. I told Dallas how Jalen wouldn't give me flowers. You were raised better than this. I told Dallas how Jalen wasn't affectionate. My parents would take me out places, but somehow they were still started taking me to nice restaurants. I knew it wasn't. I thought I had it all. I knew a good friend group didn't have the full an amazing new partner, but her words still hurt. Then Valentine's Day came around. I wasn't the only one feeling the pressure. My husband, 2 weeks in my relationship with Dallas, too. She started always very supportive when it came to helping Mark, even blocked Dallas off for social media. After watching me spend hours fielding calls and I worked together relatives and worked opposite 12-hour shift schedules. He said gently, I worked nights. This has to stop. Mornings. She told me she had something to get off her chest. Tears welling up in my eyes. But it's so explained to me she will tell everyone's me when she acting like I'm the bad guy. About Dallas. You're not the bad guy. I began to get worried. He said firmly. I later called Dallas. You've done more for Mark. I'm confused why anyone else all of a sudden doesn't like our relationship. You have to draw a line. Naya became jealous. If you don't, jealous, he was never going to out places, getting my flowers and gifts. Ryan making me happy. But knowing I was doing the right thing, she was the one who set us up together. A few days later, out the truth. Mark showed up at my door. As I'm on the phone with Dallas, he lets out a big sigh work, and confesses him and Naya have slept together multiple times, saying, stopped in December. It was insisting on talking Valentine's Day. I told him you're not home. I started crying immediately when he told me. My stomach hung up the phone and called Naya. I told Ryan not to let him in. If it was true, but I knew it wouldn't be that simple, and that he was lying. When I got home, I didn't know who to believe. Why would either of them slept in days? Keep in mind, I've only known Naya for a few months. His clothes were this guy for a few weeks, and he had that desperate look in his eyes that I told them both I needed time to process this. Can we talk? I didn't know what to do or who to believe. I sighed and sat down next to him. We all had plans to go out to the movies for what was coming. Naya launched into a speech about how hard things had been for him since our parents died. For hours, Dallas was begging me to believe him, how he'd never meant to depend on me so much. He was sorry for lying to me, but life kept throwing him curveballs. And that he only lied because Naya told him he felt like he was drowning, and that I was the only person who could pull him out. Those exact words I said to Naya when she first showed me Dallas. But I'm trying, Alex. I told her, I really am, but you just need a little more time. Because if you did, I wouldn't give him the time to keep my voice steady. Why I asked Naya this question is because she was known for having many sexual partners. And I've been there for you. It seemed like every day she'd have a new story about some guy she met on Tinder or Facebook. But it's never enough. And apparently Dallas was one of those guys. And I can't do it. They wouldn't care if their partner had a thing with one of their friends before. His eyes not one of those girls. Naya had surgery and you're giving up on me? And there was a scar there. I'm not giving up on you. I asked Dallas if he had any proof, but I'm not going to because I didn't know who to believe, and you're 35 years old. If we didn't sleep together, how would I know? It's time to take responsibility for your own life. I decided if I was going to forgive one, that I'd have to forgive the other, staring at the ground. And if I was going to cut one off, I'd have to cut the other off as well. He stood up and said, As
You're
upset
right.
as I was, I
need to
really
figure
started
this
to
out
fall
on
in
my
love
own.
with Dallas.
I didn't know
Yes,
if
he
meant
lied
it,
to me,
but
but
I
can I
hoped he
really
did.
be mad
In
at
the days
something
that
he
followed,
did before
the
he knew I
calls and
even
messages
existed?
from my
I
extended
decided to go
family
out
didn't
with him
stop.
that Valentine's
If
night to
anything,
dinner
they got
instead of the
worse.
plans we had
Mark
before
must have
of
told
all
them what
four of
happened,
us going to the
because
movies.
now the narrative had
Naya
shifted.
found out and was
It wasn't
livid.
just that I was
She cut me off
refusing to help him,
completely, and we
it
didn't
was
get
that
to
I
hear
kicked
each
him
other
out,
and
I
left
just
him
let
to
it be.
fend for himself.
I still to this
I
day
tried
don't know the
explaining the
truth.
situation to
Naya
a few
and I never
relatives,
spoke again
but
ever
it didn't
that,
make a
and
difference.
shortly after that she
They were
quit our
convinced
job.
I was the
I
villain
never
in
saw
this
her
story,
again.
and
A few
nothing I
days
said
go
was
by
going
and
to
I am
change their
still
minds.
iffy about Dallas.
Ryan suggested
But I
I
had
go
already
no
lost
contact
Naya,
with the most
and I
vocal
didn't want to
ones,
lose another person.
at least for a while.
As I said before,
and I think
I
I'm
worked
going to
night
take his
shift,
advice.
and he worked day
I
shift.
can't keep pouring my
We had
energy
opposite
into
sleep
people who
schedules
refuse
because
to
it was
see the
kind of
bigger
hard
picture.
to communicate
A
with our
week later,
schedules.
I got a
I
call
got off
from
work in
Mark.
the morning and
I
fell
almost
asleep.
didn't answer.
I accidentally
I was afraid it would be
overslept
more
and
of the
Dallas
same,
and I had
but
plans
something
to go
told
to a
me to
fair
pick up.
together.
Hey,
I wake up
he
panicking,
said.
realizing
His
I
voice
overslept.
quieter
I
than
go to
usual.
call Dallas,
I
but
just
it doesn't
wanted to
go
say I'm
through.
sorry.
I then find
was
out
stunned.
he blocked me off
Mark
of
had
everything.
never apologized
Long story
to me
short,
for
I then
anything.
find out
Ever.
he ended up
I've
taking his
been doing a lot
ex-girlfriend
of
to the
thinking,
fair instead of
he
me.
continued.
I had a
you're
photo
right.
sent to me
I've
from
been
her
leaning
number,
on you way
photo
too
of them
much.
naked together in
It's not
bed.
fair.
I felt
and
like
I'm
a
sorry.
complete idiot.
I didn't
and
know
so
what to
hurt
say.
and confused.
Thank you.
I had officially gave up on
That means
Dallas
a lot.
within that 1 month
I'm not
of us
saying
dating.
I've got it all
Later
figured
that day,
out,
Dallas
he
texts
said,
and calls
but
me
I'm
a
going to
million
try.
times saying he's
I'm
so
looking for a
sorry
new
and he
job,
panicked,
and I'm
and
going
he
to
didn't
figure
even
out
want
how
to
to
go
pay
with
my
her.
own
But when I
bills.
didn't answer
I
him, he
just-
thought I had
I
broken
wanted
up with
you to
him
know
when in
that.
reality I was
For the
sleeping for
first
my
time in
12-hour
years,
nursing
I
shift.
felt a glimmer
like
of
an
hope.
idiot. It's
I
been a
forgave
month
him.
since that call.
Days go by and
things
then
have
find
been
out
better.
he's still in
Mark has a
communication
new
with his
job,
ex-girlfriend.
and while it's not perfect,
We argue about
it's a
it.
start.
He says he will stop.
He's still struggling.
He told me he
but he
didn't
hasn't
even
asked
want
me
his
for
ex,
money once.
and that she had traumatized
I think he's
him because
finally
their
starting to
relationship was like a
understand that I
cheating
can't be
match.
his safety
Who can
net
hurt the
forever.
other more type of
As
thing.
for my
He
extended
said
family,
he slept with a lot
I've
of
stopped
girls
trying to
while dating
justify
her to get
myself
back
to
at
her for doing
the
the
ones
same.
who really know
I then
me.
asked him how many
Ryan,
girls
a
has he
few
been
close
with.
friends.
He told me he lost
Understand why I
count, but
did
it's
what
in
I
the
did,
70s.
and that's enough
Throughout
for me.
our relationship,
So,
we had good
Reddit.
times.
Am
But
I
it would
the
be
asshole?
almost every
Maybe
week
to
he would
some
slip
people,
up.
I am.
I've caught him with
But for
porn
the
sites
first
in his
time in a
history,
long
and
time,
to some people that's not
I feel like
cheating,
I've
but
done
I
the
told
right
him how I
thing.
felt about
Not
that.
just for
and
me,
he said he'd
but for
stop.
Mark
He promised
too.
me he would.
And I
but
think
I
that's
just
what
keep
really
catching him on
matters.
hookup sites, sending nude photos to random women, dating apps on his phone,